So we are hearing this morning that the final verdict into Partygate, the year-long investigation into whether Boris Johnson did or did not mislead Parliament, is finally coming to an end. There are reports that it is going to land either on the 23rd or 24th, or at least that's when they'll finish their investigation. And then we'll find out, of course. But we'll go into more sort of the process and what could happen, and essentially some shenanigans that maybe Johnson or maybe his allies might try and pull to try and save Johnson. Will they or will they not? That, of course, remains to be seen, but we'll see. But it's weird to think that this time last year, even though we probably didn't realize it at the time, this was the beginning of the end of Boris Johnson. We were coming up to, in fact, in a couple of weeks' time, we are now coming up to the first time that Boris would be facing the first vote of no confidence, and that was to whole do with the Owen Paterson scandal, if you may remember. Of course, afterwards, the Owen Paterson scandal would come forward. Actually, no. Was it no, or was it the other way around? Was it Partygate, then Owen Paterson? I can't remember exactly which way it happened now. But the one man is we're coming up to the first anniversary of this, and Johnson barely scraped through, showing that overwhelmingly a large section of his party just did not have confidence in him. And everyone was like, well, if there's so many people against him, he's got to be careful. And everyone was saying at the time, all the MPs were saying, we've had enough. If he does it again, he's had it. And of course, we remember what happened. He survived those two votes of no confidence, just barely scraping through. Certainly the second one. And then, of course, we got the shock resignation with the whole Chris Pincher scandal. And when that came out, everyone was like, here we go again. Here we go again. What did Johnson did or did not know? Did he know about all these allegations? Did he not? And of course, the usual thing happened of ministers came out to try and defend the government. Turned out they'd been lied to, literally told on air they were lying, got absolutely furious. And of course, what happened the next day? Javid and of course Sunak both resigned, which then would obviously start pretty much the carousel of people resigning, lasting sometimes less than less than an hour in post. Of course, at that point, Johnson really forced to go. So it is kind of weird that we're almost on the anniversary of what was the beginning of the end of Johnson. And it would continue what certainly was last year an absolute crazy time in British politics. And it was only about to get even more crazier because we were about to get the Tory leadership contest, which would go into sort of Liz Truss, we'd get her premiership, and so on. But what happens now? Well, first things first, the report will ultimately be published, and Johnson will get a response. If they find Johnson guilty, Johnson gets about 2 weeks to be able to respond. Then there will be a motion tabled in Parliament by Rishi Sunak's government, basically to say the report has found this. We're going to sort of punish Johnson in this way. Now, this is where the interesting part could come in, because Johnson's allies could try and pull an Owen Paterson and try and amend this motion to try and save Johnson. Now, would they do that? Would they mess with this motion to try and save Johnson? They might. We don't really know. This is a thing of how much pull does Johnson still have within the party to try and save him? Would people risk their future careers potentially to try and save Johnson? It's not on the realms of possibility of happening, but it could happen. And if it does happen, oh boy, is Rishi Sunak going to have a massive, massive headache on his hands. That's for sure. Expect probably a three-line whip if this happens. But even then, as we've seen, Rishi Sunak is very weak and has had rebellions about rebellions. And if he is not seen to be certainly strong on this, well, what is he strong on? And a lot of people were saying because Johnson voted against the Windsor Agreement, he should have the whip removed from him. Sunak didn't do that. He was far too weak to do it. He will be far too weak, I think, to potentially even stop rebels trying to save Johnson on this front. And then what would happen was that we potentially see a by-election. There's big doubts whether Johnson would actually be able to win that by-election, and then he would be gone. But we're going to be seeing, I think, towards the end of this month, the findings of the Partygate inquiry. As of always, we'll have to sort of wait and see what the inquiry brings forward. But to be honest, it is going to be hard for them because they've got to obviously prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Johnson had lied to Parliament deliberately. It's something very hard to prove, even in sort of a normal sort of course of law. They've got to prove that he lied sort of deliberately, and that's a really tall order to try and do. And they are sifting through mountains of evidence to try and do that. Not just, of course, the inquiry that we saw just a couple of weeks ago now. So since we saw that, so Partygate soon coming back into the headlines, and then will Johnson's allies on the backbenches try and save him? Rishi Sunak is a weak prime minister, so there is every possibility that could happen. But if it does happen, that's going to cause a massive uproar, That's for certain. So we'll see what happens there, but Partygate could once again coming roaring back into the headlines. And of course, Johnson could cause massive trouble if his allies feel that they should sort of, try to save Johnson. But like I say, we'll see what happens. Like I say, Rishi Sunak is a very, very weak prime minister. So, like I say, he didn't even feel the need to remove the whip from Johnson in regard to sort of him voting against the Windsor framework. So, what's Sunak going to do? Sunak's already proven that if you are disloyal to him or the party, he's not going to do anything to you. Hence why I've had all these rebellions. So the fact that Johnson's allies may actually generally try to save him is a very real possibility. But like I say, we'll wait and find out what happens. We'll wait to see what the report says. We'll wait to see what the findings of the Partygate inquiry are. So until then, it does look like Johnson's entire political career will be found out just within a couple of weeks. So until then, of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.